Hey everyone, look, it's the guy behind the voice that you've been hearing all this time. Crazy how that works. Anyway, today's gonna be a little bit different of a format for a video because I got a couple comments on a video, like, you know, the one that's literally up there on screen. And I actually often get comments on this video because it's just an objectively bad video, and that's what we're here to explain today. Now, a while ago, starting with my colonization guide video, I wanted to redo all of my really old and poorly made videos, but unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of time for that, and I can't write humor into scripts. So instead, I'm gonna go through this whole video, break down every single part of it which is wrong, and try to build it back up with correct information. For reference, this video is pretty much 2 years old, and it's really bad. Like, it is definitely not my finest work, and you're not only going to see a big difference in the presentation of the video, but you're definitely going to hear it as well. So let's get started. Are you interested in the economies of hordes and how to make those piles of ducats? Interested in figuring out how to turn that horde world conquest into profit? Well, you've come to the right place. My name is Quarbit. Okay, let me start right there. Yes, that's my voice from 2019. Sounds different, I know. Try not to think about it too much. Anyway, let me begin by saying I'm not the prophet of hordes. Clearly there are a lot of people out there who are better at playing hordes than I am. Yes, there are. You have no idea. No idea at all. There are a lot of things you can learn from one playthrough, and this first horde game playthrough that I've ever played in my life is actually going to be a world conquest fairly soon. Okay, now this isn't wrong, because it did end up being a world conquest. However, we have to mention the fact that that was done through pretty much force of will and using pretty much no solid actual strategy. Just because it ended up being a world conquest does not mean that I was using the right method or playing optimally at all. Keep in mind, we're playing a horde here, okay? Hordes are not hard to world conquest with, because I was able to world conquest with terrible ideas, and I managed to do it by like something around 1819, okay? Which isn't like a great number, but it worked, it finished, okay? And that was starting as Oirat. More recently, I did a world conquest starting as Saragyo-Gir. I didn't form Yuan, I didn't form the Mongol Empire, just a straight world conquest, just one tag Saragyo-Gir, okay? And I managed to finish that in like 1813 or 1803 or something, I don't remember. And then even more recently, I played a game where I did a speed forming of the Mongol Empire within 80 years. There is always a way to do better, and this video here that we're watching is not how you get better. Alright then, let's talk about some of the misconceptions a lot of horde noobs have about playing hordes and more the economy side of things. One is that horde economies cannot be stable because of raising, which is absolutely not true. Now I start to go into myths which didn't really exist, like no one really asked these questions or said these things. But anyway, starting with this one, raising doesn't give you a stable economy, right? It doesn't, to be honest. It really just doesn't. If you want a stable economy, you pretty much need to have someone to go to and sack every few years for a lot of money. For instance, Muscovy can be one of those if you're in the west, or Poland and Lithuania can also do that. Ottomans if you're pretty confident. Ming especially if you're playing in the east, because you can expand a lot faster towards the west than you could towards the east if you use Ming as a piggy bank. So your main source of income is probably more going to be stuff like trade if you set up your trade properly, and probably stealing money from other people. Raising doesn't really actually give you that much. The points are important, but it's not about the money. 2. You should only raise if you need horde unity. This is another thing that literally no one believes whatsoever. Obviously, everyone knows that you should raise without just needing horde unity. That's one of the most basic things about being a horde. 3. It is easy to end up in a spiral of debt as a horde. This is one of the things that tends to turn new players off of hordes more than you think. Now, I don't know why I said this. It is easy to spiral into debt as a horde, especially if you don't manage your loans. If you take out a bunch of loans and you don't ever pay them back, you're going to get massive amounts of interest, which is going to end up forcing you to take out more loans, which is going to compound more interest, so on and so forth. Your inflation keeps on getting higher, which is going to make you pay more on your armies. It's going to make your interest more expensive, and things are not going to go well. It is easy to spiral into debt as a horde. The ways that you can avoid that are essentially using those piggy banks, like I mentioned, like Ming, Muscovy, pretty much any nation where you can get more money out of it than you put into getting the money, obviously. There are also a multitude of other ways that you can prevent going into big amounts of debt. For instance, having fewer rebels means you don't have to raise your men to fight them, you don't have to spend as much on army maintenance or reinforcement to fight rebels. And how do you do that? Picking up the right ideas, like getting horde ideas or getting humanist ideas, combining them to reduce years of separatism, reduce national unrest, increase your tolerance of heretics and heathens, and your religious unity. Also, having a high stability to make sure you have fewer rebels can make sure that you don't spend as much on squashing rebels with your armies, and you can spend your army's money and time more on conquest, which can feed you more money from raising and from piecing out people in peace deals. So it's not a misconception that it's too easy to spiral into debt as a horde, it is a fact, you just have to know how to manage it properly. The great thing about hordes is that you can punch way above your weight throughout the entire game solely due to your cavalry. Okay, that's pretty true, yeah. I would say it depends on who you're fighting and what terrain, and you need to make sure you're always fighting favorable battles on stuff like flat terrain. But generally, yes, because of your combat ability, usually it's somewhere around 25 to 30% depending on who you're playing, you can absolutely roll your enemies with your cavalry. Keep in mind though that this is mainly early game. Your shock is much more effective at the beginning, and as the time progresses, your infantry are going to have more fire and you're going to slowly phase cavalry out. As a horde, you might keep some cavalry because of your combat ability, but keep in mind it's not going to roll as much in the end game as it is at the beginning, so that was a little bit wrong. So your first war, in my opinion, should be against a non-horde that is decently sized, so you can raise a bunch of development off of them. Also, not wrong, I wouldn't say it's about raising a bunch of dev. It depends on your mission tree as well as how much money can you take out of them. For instance, an early war with Ming I wouldn't use to take provinces. I might take a couple, but what I'm definitely looking for is max money as well as the war reps, because that will fuel your economy for a little while as you can keep on conquesting. Since we're also still talking about early game, let's talk about developing the Renaissance in your capital. Of course, you're gonna have to do that. And it's more than likely going to be absolutely trash to develop. I kind of already know what I'm going to say here, and I can tell from my gameplay footage here that I'm just really stupid. Of course we knew this already, but no, this is worse than you think it is. So, if your capital is in the mountains, don't develop on your capital just because it's your capital, okay? You have to take in a bunch of factors to decide where to develop the institution. If you need to move your capital to a better position to develop the institution, then do it. If it costs you 200, but you save, say, 250 points from it, then do it. You have to assess the chart and make sure that what you're developing in is actually going to be, you know, the best case for you. If you have to state something or you have to move your capital somewhere else, then don't be afraid to do that. That's kind of part of the whole institution thing. And then, of course, you could just not develop in your capital. That's also a thing. Yeah, and I just watched a little bit further. I didn't mention any of that stuff in this video, so that's pretty important stuff to know. I'll leave a link to the chart in the description, which tells you how many monarch points you're going to have to spend on a province in order to develop an institution. Just off the top of my head, I believe some of the better numbers are 16, 18, and 20 for starting development. But of course, don't forget to factor in things like terrain. Because now we get to talk about the first fun part of the game, which is going to be your first idea group. This should pretty much be a no-brainer, because if you need money, you get money modifiers. Oh, you poor idiot. You poor fool. If only things were this simple, right? Okay. So, the idea recommendations in this video are probably the worst part. Don't take economic as a horde, generally, okay? We can just start with that fact. And definitely, don't take it first. Why? Well, it's an admin tech group. That means you're going to be spending more on an idea than you're going to be spending on coring. You want to core things, because that's how you generally sort of make money and manpower, coring things into states, coring new territory. That stuff is more important than finishing your first idea group with admin, okay? Secondly, if you're hurting on money in the early game, what you really have to do is find targets which you spend less money fighting than you will get at the end of the war. Obviously, we already talked about countries like Muscovy, Lithuania, Poland, Ming especially Ming. Please, if you're playing Oirat, attack Ming first, because economic here isn't actually going to get you that much money. Think about this, okay? 10% national tax modifier is not going to be worth much. Construction cost, what are you constructing as a horde? Please tell me. You don't construct much as hordes because you need the money to conquest. Yearly inflation reduction is actually worth it, and as well as interest per annum, especially because hordes, you know, obviously they don't have the special burger loans which are 1% interest. But other than that, you're not getting a whole lot out of this. The monthly autonomy change, sure, it can be useful, but it's not really that needed. The land maintenance modifier is okay, but you could also just use quantity for a better modifier and better other things as well. And the production efficiency definitely does not matter early game. You don't make anything off of production early game, especially when you have a bunch of garbage 3 development provinces that have 90% autonomy. And your bonus is great if you were ever going to develop as a horde. I already mentioned in this video that you're not going to be developing many institutions after like the first 3 or 4, because you can usually just steal them from other people. And to top all of that, if you wanted an actually good idea group for money, just pick up trade, okay? Trade will help you do things like steal money from other nodes. It'll also help you to push trade along a large network using trade steering. It will help to amplify that bonus, as well as give you extra merchants that you can actually collect more money. And eventually, if you do your trade situation correctly, and you are collecting in Persia or somewhere near there, and you are grabbing all the money from Asia, like China and India, then you're going to be stacking a lot more cash using trade ideas than you would ever be stacking with economic. Now, the only downside is that you'll be spending a lot of admin points to rush down the economic tree. Don't worry about that though, you can use wars to take exclusively money, war reps, and humiliation to get yourself some more points and money while occasionally taking land to subsidize your horde unity. That's pretty much the plan you're going to want to go with. Now you might— No, it's not. No, it really isn't. It actually just isn't. I tried to make this justification for why you're spending so much admin on a useless idea group, but in the end, it really just doesn't work out at all. It just doesn't. If you want, like, an actually good first idea group to take, then my best recommendation would probably be something around the Horde Government Idea Group or Quantity. Maybe Humanist, but I really wouldn't at first because, as I mentioned, you kind of want to keep that admin. So, probably something around those two. Quantity, because you don't generally make too much manpower at the beginning, you don't have a lot of states because your admin sucks and you're trying to conquer a bunch of garbage land, and horde government ideas are basically built for hordes, like decreased national unrest, aggressive expansion, you increase your religious unity, and you decrease your cav costs. There's a bunch of other things, but everything, and I mean like literally every one of those ideas, is better than half the stuff in economic. That would pretty much be like one of the go-to starters to begin with. You might be asking, so why am I even rushing down economic? Let's just say that the minus 20% development cost is a mystery tool that would help us for the rest of the game. Now, this sounds interesting, but it really isn't. We'll get to that later, okay? But no, it isn't. Not only that, but having those modifiers will help decrease your monthly deficit. Yes, of course I said deficit. I really hope you didn't think you'd be making money at this point already. And there you go, there's a classic example of me not being able to write humor into any sort of script whatsoever. That's why this video wasn't scripted, by the way. I just can't. I can't write humor into anything. It depends a lot on where you're playing, but in early game horde play, it's generally better to expand in a single direction towards the most development. Okay, you were close, but not really. Okay, so the whole thing about expanding in one direction— sort of. It's more like expanding in one religious group so that you can clear it out. The problem is that if you try to attack many religious groups, then you're going to get coalitions of significant size, rather than if you were to focus down one, so that you would have fewer and fewer tags that are, you know, angry at you for doing that. It's not really about going towards the most development as much as it is going towards things that would help to clear out your missions, to get you those permaclaims, those permanent modifiers, as well as certain religions so that you can focus down large chunks of land without having massive coalitions. Although it's nice and it sounds good to try and go for as much development as possible, in reality, you can really take as much development in one war as you can in a different one, because the way that war score works is that a province's development significantly increases the cost of the war score. So it's not as much about just going for tons of dev. It's just taking lots of land, so that you can raise it all and get a bunch of points. Trust me, the religious group thing is definitely more important than going for high dev areas. Hordes have this interesting style of play where you'll have a massive economic base in one continent while you're invading the rest of the world late game. It's not really about having this massive economic base in a specific place. It's more about just like, okay, I'm gonna state a whole bunch of stuff, and I might have said this because back when this was recorded, you could only have a limited number of states. Therefore, you wanted to create states in high development areas. So it's not completely wrong for the time, but that's not how it would work anymore. Not at all. Basically, the goal is you want to state as much as you can while still being able to conquer. So if you have leftover admin from all of your conquering, you want to use that to consolidate states so that you can reduce their autonomy and start making some taxation Mainly manpower is the thing we're looking for because you're sort of running on a loan economy. Your general direction of conquest should be towards really high development states that you won't be raising in the end. Especially states that are in easier to develop terrain like grasslands, farmlands, and comparatively drylands. Alright, so what I was saying here is kind of true for the time, sort of. If you're going to make states, of course you want to make states in areas that are easier to develop and have a lot of development. But nowadays, because you don't have a limited number of states, that's not exactly the case anymore. Don't forget that you're also going to need a second idea group while you're in the process of setting up shop. I'd recommend something to make your armies a little bit more powerful. Personally, I think quality is going to be your best bet because it powers up all of your combat abilities and it ends up giving you an extra 10% more discipline when you combine it with the previous economic ideas. Okay, so you guys know about this thing called circular reasoning, right? Where you justify something off of something else, which sort of justifies it off the previous thing, so you go in the circle of, okay, I'm going to take economic, just because, and then I'm going to take quality, because it stacks with economic, for more discipline. So it sort of justifies itself based off the previous thing, which didn't really have a justification, except you could say, oh, but if I take quality, then we could, yeah, you know what I'm saying. While not incorrect, the thing is, you don't need it. You really just don't. As a horde, your main concern isn't exactly your combat ability in individual battles. It's about being able to reinforce your armies, and it's about being able to have an economy, sort of, but also being able to continue your momentum for conquest. Being able to fight better feels good in battles, but you know what it doesn't do? It doesn't reduce your aggressive expansion with your neighbors, it doesn't give you more manpower to work with to fight on more fronts, and it doesn't help to suppress rebels. So it sounds nice on paper, but in reality, you could pick so many more things that are more important to the general needs of a horde. Fighting ability isn't one of your greatest concerns as a horde, it just really isn't, because of your cavalry combat ability as well as your ability to just do better on flat terrain with horses. A much better second idea group would probably be something like humanist. For instance, if you were to take horde government ideas as your first idea group, which already gives you a bunch of bonuses, there's already a reason to take that by itself, and then you take humanist, then you can stack that for more national unrest decrease and fewer years of separatism. This means that you don't have to deal with rebels as often, you can direct your armies towards conquest instead of rebel suppression, and you can spend less money on having your armies raised and being reinforced on fighting rebels. Not to mention, as a horde, quality is already sort of a weird thing to pick up because your infantry isn't really what's going to be dealing the most amount of damage, and you don't need the cavalry combat ability. Plus, the next three ideas, I mean, you're not really going to be using. You don't need much of a navy to do well as a horde until much later, and at that point you can just use sheer numbers to even win against Britain, or you can just be smart with your ships when you're landing, so you don't need these three ideas. Also, artillery combat ability, you're not going to use it for like until artillery actually becomes like mainstream useful in the back row, which, surprise, isn't for a while after quality, so on top of that, the discipline, although it's nice, you just don't need it, so yeah. Other idea groups that could be useful for the second idea group slot would be maybe trade, depending on how much you have already conquered. If you've made your way into an area like Persia or China and you need more merchants to collect all that trade, then it's not a bad idea. As well as getting yourself maybe some Diplo. Diplo ideas can be kind of decent because the improved relations can help to decay your aggressive expansion, as well as that very useful province war score cost modifier. It's going to allow you to take more land, which is obviously a good thing. So for your third idea group, I definitely recommend picking up religious ideas. Oh no! Please don't. Don't do this. I don't even know if I have to explain this, but just don't. Just don't do it, okay? Listen to me. Just don't do it. Don't. There's no reason to. Okay, let me just hear my old self out, hear him try to justify any reason why you would ever take religious as a horde, so that I can precisely determine why you shouldn't. While you already have a really good CB to work with the whole game, religious ideas will help you convert in the vast number of territories you're going to have. That was a non-argument. I just said words, but they didn't mean anything. Nothing there actually meant any concept whatsoever. You don't convert things. That's the point. That's the whole purpose. You don't convert things. Oh no, what about religious unity? Too bad. You know how you get religious unity? You can pick up one of your tribal traditions to gain more religious unity. You can get yourself humanist ideas for religious unity. You can get yourself the Horde government ideas for religious unity. And there are probably more things to get more religious unity, okay? Converting will not get you as much religious unity as these ideas would give you. And typically, the religion you start with isn't great at converting, well, especially if you're Tangri. If you're Sunni, in that case, you may have a slightly better argument, but it's still not a good one, because you still conquer too much land, so... Your fourth idea group should be something along the lines of trade, I believe. Okay, you did one thing right. You did a single thing right. Congratulations. Round of applause for getting one thing right in this video. After that, the next 4 idea groups are really up to you, since you'll be well on your way to conquering a whole continent by the time you reach number 5. Okay, I think that was me being lazy. I'm gonna see if I mentioned any more idea groups first. Okay, I didn't mention anything about idea groups in the future, because I was lazy, that's it. I went with this whole, oh, it's up to you type of thing. Okay, that's what we like to believe. Okay, we like to think about that. It isn't. There are things which are optimal, okay? For instance, taking admin ideas would be great to reduce the cost of coring, as well as increase your governing capacity so you can have more states, that you can have more production, you know, have a better economy, and get more manpower out of them. Another important thing is offensive ideas, because that decreases the time it takes to siege, which means you can win wars faster. It also gives you discipline, which I guess previous me was addicted to having for some reason. Espionage is often sort of considered this joke idea group because overall it just isn't too great. But unironically, if you took it as one of the later ones, then maybe it would help you a little bit with your expansion into Europe, because you do get minus 20% aggressive expansion. And maybe quality wouldn't be a terrible idea, because at the end of the game, if you have to use ships, then that would help you a little bit. So there's a little bit to be said for that. So while, yeah, sure, it's up to you, there are definitely suggestions I could have made, and those are pretty much my best ones. Moving on, let's talk about the most important part of the economic strategy that I figured out pretty well into my journey. Now, a bit of context for this. Hordes are based off of taking land, obviously, and raising it down for points and money. Well, as you become more and more efficient in taking land, you'll end up with large excesses of points at multiple times. With your easy-to-develop state land in tandem with economic ideas, you should be able to play extremely tall in your states while just draining all the points out of your territories. Now, back when I wrote this, I thought I did something. And the basic idea makes so much sense on paper that it probably managed to convince a lot of people. However, if you have extra points, there are many other things you could be using them for. If you have extra admin points, make sure that your inflation is as close to 0 as it can be. If you have extra military points, you can spend them in professionalism to get yourself faster siege ability and fight a little bit better. As for your Diplo, you can spend that on reducing your war exhaustion so that you can keep your war uptime up for much longer, of course. It also helps to decrease the cost of coring so that you can finish a war, decrease your war exhaustion, core, and then go into another war. It allows you to keep up your momentum for longer because you don't have as much unrest, you don't have to spend as much time or money dealing with rebels because you have less unrest, and it allows you to you just keep going for longer. I thought I did something, because if you have a bunch of states that are really good to develop, and you have modifiers to help you develop them even better. Keep in mind, China is like majority farmlands, right? That's minus 15 off the bat. So you're thinking to yourself, man, I could really develop these provinces. You have to keep in mind that you can just use your governing capacity on new states, and you have to think about the fact that conquering more land costs less admin and gives you more development. So if you're considering maybe dropping Diplo points or extra mill points into it, sure, that's not bad. You know, if you have max professionalism and you have no war exhaustion or anything else to spend Diplo on, that's not terrible. But as for having extra points, you really shouldn't have extra points, unless you're somehow blessed with really good kings, or you already have like level 5 advisors and you're getting towards the end game. That's where, you know, you have extra points. Keep in mind there are other things to do, like barraging forts and scorching provinces, which take precedence over giving yourself maybe 0.001% more development, or even less than that actually. So the idea on paper is like, wow, isn't that cool? But in reality, you shouldn't have the extra points to spend on something that ridiculously unimportant. Yeah, I go into this whole thing where it's like, if I put 1 dev in a 0 autonomy state, it's equal to 4 dev in a 75% autonomy state, which is true, but, you know, for all the things I already mentioned, it's not what you want to do. Also, even less so these days because states are 90% autonomy, which is pretty bad. Not to mention all of the, you know, the whole thing about having trade companies kind of matters. If you want to move your capital to Europe and trade company a bunch of stuff in the East, while keeping some states, of course, for manpower, you're just going to make a lot more money that way anyway, so yeah. And then I do this whole comparison thing where it's like, oh, look at the economy back then versus look at the economy now. Like, yeah, you stated all of China, of course you're going to make a lot of money, but look how far you've actually gone. You just own China and Korea and like some of Central Asia, and it's like 1600, you really didn't do anything. Like, you didn't do much. It seems impressive to someone who is unskilled, and I was unskilled when making this video, so hopefully I helped to clear up a lot of the misconceptions that I put out through this video. I will be unlisting this video once the new one's out, so as in a guide to hordes and their economics is going to only exist to people who have the link, and the link's going to be in the description so that it's not entirely erased from internet history. It will serve as a reminder of a time when I was not as good at the game and I was spreading misinformation like an absolute idiot. But hopefully this new video serves a lot better than this old one, and I hope it's a lot more useful, as I now have at least 2,000 more hours of experience, and I've played Hordes more than once. That's a pretty decent criteria, I think. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, it would be nice if you would consider dropping a like. That would be super appreciated. I don't know if I'll really be making more of these videos correcting my old, previous terrible ones, so I don't know if I can use this video as a don't forget to subscribe kind of one, because I don't know if I'll make more of these. If there are some videos which, you know, require correction and you guys want to see more videos like this one where I go back and correct them, then of course let me know down below. But for now, this is Quarbit signing off, and as always, have a fantastic day. As always, huge thank you to the wonderful people up on screen. Big shout out to Ben Greenhagen, Brennan Arsenault, Dire Avenger, Quiet Guy, Torvald, Bouncer Steve, Commander Natsuki, Robert Caleno, Rockbox 2020, Snow Raven, Chewy Shoot, and The Watcher for being particularly fantastic patrons this month. All of the people up here had access to this video early, so if you'd also like to have early access, then the Patreon link is in the description down below. And if you want to check out some more cool videos, then personally I recommend some of the ones that you're seeing on your screen right here.